So the reason I have founded this HI AI collective is because we are at a tipping point in terms of the research that is coming out. It's this is the way I see it. So Jazz and I had a call a few weeks ago talking about AI, HI. So that's on LinkedIn. And we looked at some research there, and I've put some of that onto the HI AI collective group. The point of the group really is to have a space where we can share the challenges that we're facing across sectors and across generations, but also put some research and have a space that is intergenerational, cross-sector, and really focuses on HI first. So this image behind me, that is really there to show the idea of that we are in the, well, it's not just an idea, it is showing diagrammatically the fifth generation, the fifth industrial revolution. So we are really in a stage now where we are everything is focused so much on AI and tech that HI is being neglected. And this is something that I've noticed over many, many years, even way before AI. But AI now, the research is showing, is really creating cognitive decline. It's creating cognitive offloading. And it's all about how we use it, though. AI in itself is amazing, but it's all about how we use it. So I wanted there to be a space where everybody can come together and actually also honestly talk to each other about the challenges. Because when in my role as an organizational psychologist, what I found again and again is as I'm extracting the intelligence of people from across organizations, trying to get into the heart of issues to help to solve problems, it's the actual human intelligence that is really neglected. And that's been the case for a long, long time. And the human intelligence being neglected then leads to a sense of learned helplessness. People are very much just in their task modes. And that is actually not how humans work. So learned helplessness ensues. So people are working in their tasks, working not with their human needs. So there's a massive tension between human needs and the business needs. And then, of course, for many, many years, we've had a big, big focus on tech. So I've been involved in many tech implementation projects, but looking at the human side of how can humans really engage with the tech. And this was way before AI, but now we have AI on top of traditional tech. So this is really why I thought, right, we need to have a space where we discuss really the implications of this, but also are there to support each other, and where we can put research, challenges, anything that we think is useful. So today I wanted to really have some coming together to say, okay, what do we feel this community can offer? Your thoughts, ideas of how a community can support people. And then also Tom, I invited Tom Flatau because I shared one of your articles, and that was as I was putting some of the information together for the community. I've loaded a few articles up there, a few PDFs. I think it's really important to look at primary source data. There's a massive academic practitioner divide. Actually look, obviously we don't have time to read loads of journal articles, but there are some key bits of research which are really showing us information that I think all leaders need to know. And even if you're not an actual leader as such, that you're leading in an organization, but you're a leader of self, you're a leader of whatever you're doing in your work. And there are certain bits of research that we all really need to understand so that we can take responsibility for how we navigate this space on planet Earth 5.0, this fifth industrial revolution. So your article, Tom, was all about social intelligence, wasn't it? That actually,
yeah,
social intelligence. So But can we, first of all, there's only a small number of us here because we didn't, sadly, Kajabi, if you didn't hear that, Martin, if you're listening in the background, Kajabi is down at the moment, which is where the community. So just if you explain your background of neuroscience.
Yeah, well, I've been interested in neuroscience for, say, 15 years, applied neuroscience. I'm not a biologist or
Yeah.
um and originally it was just sort of reading avidly, and then I did a qualification in applied neuroscience and got a certificate, I think they call it. Um, and yeah, I like to bring that into all the training and development and even coaching that I do, because I think, some science-based development
Hmm. Hmm.
adds a lot of credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been doing that for many years, haven't you? You've been looking
I
at
have
doing
indeed, yeah, but
leadership development, you've been doing team development, you've worked internationally.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you've really, really focused on the human side of things, on the human intelligence,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
more
yeah,
than the tech side, which is also why I
yeah,
thought it'd be
absolutely.
interesting to bring you in to kind of just as a focus on, what neuroscience can tell us and how important it is to focus on it. And if we don't focus on it, what the impact is as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah,
And this
yeah.
is why I thought, your article on Big Brain was just a brief outline, but it's really looking at the very thing that we're neglecting, or one of the things we're neglecting, which is really, the main point I wanted to sort of bring out here, that, there's so many things we're neglecting when it comes to harnessing human intelligence in organizations anyway. And then on top of that, we're now focusing so much on AI as opposed to focusing on HI and
Mm.
how to harness that. So from the neuroscience point of view, I thought that was interesting to consider. But before we go into that, Jazz, do you want to introduce yourself so that Tom also can know who you are and how you fit into the picture? And because you've got in your background AI Coaching Alliance, so Tom might think he's talking to a complete AI geek.
Yeah,
And then actually Jazz is, what I love about Jazz and how we connected was that even though you, apologies if that's the wrong expression, an AI geek, but even though you're focused on AI, you are incredibly focused on HI too, which is why I was so drawn to your blend. So would you like to introduce yourself and just explain that connection, that how you try to balance those two things out, and then we'll come back to Tom and discuss that neuroscience social side of things.
I poke myself in the eye. That's something an AI probably wouldn't do, randomly. That proves I'm human and not AI.
Okay, you are human. Okay.
I've been interested in AI, but also interested in consciousness from a very young age. I put together code for my first AI chatbot in 1980. I borrowed some code from the person who created the first chatbot in 1966, for Eliza. But years later, after finishing my degrees were in science. I was training to be an astronaut. I went to do my first degree was in astrophysics. But then I got really interested in astronauts who'd gone through shifts in consciousness while they were in space. So my master's degree focused on the brain and shifting consciousness through various kinds of drugs that people do, including anesthetics, and looking at how anesthetics get a person to change their state of consciousness. And that led me into mind body medicine and looking at how the brain through the other systems in the body, like the immune and endocrine systems, cause psychosomatic disorders and stress-related disorders. And that eventually got me into training in medicine myself, but in not Western medicine, but Chinese medicine and martial arts and Indian ancestral forms of wisdom. And that led me to coaching. And I built my own AI coaching platform based on that in 2008. So I've been practicing using AI in coaching for about 17 years. But I do a lot of work with university, and I did end up doing work at NASA, designing training to improve performance for the astronauts using AI, biometrics, and virtual reality technologies. And in the last couple of years, I've been focused heavily on using AI more from an educational perspective for coaches and mentors and people in therapy. And the role I have currently is European Mentoring Coaching Council's global research lead. So that keeps me busy. I've just come back from 2 weeks of conferences all about a hybrid intelligence in New York and mentoring in Italy. So that'll do for now, I think.
Yeah. So you're
Fascinating, Jazz. Fascinating.
Thank you, Tom.
And how do you use how do you blend AI and coaching then?
Well, back in 2008, I wanted to find a better way for getting an audit of someone's energy, how well they were meeting their needs through emotional and social intelligence. So I created a survey based on that, and then using digital statistics, created some results that could be useful in helping in therapy and in coaching. I did a trial with the NHS in a mental health hospital to help people track their mental health. And then following that, I created the algorithms to take the data and turn it into machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI analytics. And then tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to be doing a workshop with about 100 participants from Greece and Romania online,
Oh,
where we're going
gosh.
to do a whole experiment in about 2 hours. So, yeah, my last 100 clients were all women entrepreneurs, and they use the platform daily for 3 months as part of their entrepreneurial development program. So it's kept me busy.
Very nice. Very interesting.
So they've used the platform, and you're taking that data in order to test that and apply it to different contexts, or
Well, what they do is they log in each day, they get a picture of their state of mind, on which they can make their own decisions on what to do about it, or they can use the AI to recommend a priority for them to go and work on, either with themselves or with other people. And then the
Mhm.
AI also matches them to other people in the group and suggests which are people to best support them, which ones are best to challenge them, and which ones are best to help them reflect. And those
Mhm.
three things are really critical for development of anybody. It's usually when people don't get the support, challenge, or reflection that they need that they start developing pathologies in their growth and their learning and development. So the AI is geared to helping them find that for themselves, as well as together with other people that they might be together with in a cohort or a learning program.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm, very
Interesting.
interesting. Thank you, Jazz. Yeah.
So so that's a very, very innovative way of using AI together with coaching. I don't think that's sort of a
Mm,
mainstream
mm.
way of doing things. I think, Jazz, you're ahead of the game. And people who've been in touch with me have been quite worried about what AI is doing as well. And you've obviously managed to harness it in a positive way, which is really also great to hear. And I think where people can see, okay, AI is a positive, potentially positive tool, but it's also a potentially destructive tool, which is
Yeah,
why.
it's amazing how much right now I'm actually doing the opposite, which is promoting, the things that are necessary to keep our humanity. And although I'm seen as an AI guy, they're quite surprised, like at the Columbia conference last week, for me to be the one that's waving the flag of the need to address cultivating our humanity and not offloading it to AI, for example.
Mhm, mhm. So you're focusing, as you are seen as an AI person. Are people surprised when you then talk about more the human side? Is that something that people are not expecting?
Well, they're expecting me to at least mention things like ethics and safety and security. But when I say, look, in the end, if this starts to take us away from our connection to what it is to not just be human, but to our connection that is deeper, that relates to our humanity, our shared humanity, the result will be that if we offload that to AI and we have less and less humanity over time, that's not going to end well, especially for the planet, and not to mention, you know, various kind of levels of society. And in government, that's really important, because as much as it's good to get industry to take on AI, if it's done at the loss of engagement of employees and loss of their flourishing, which is very Industry 5.0 orientation, then you'll have nobody to work the machines, and you'll have humans that become more and more like machines as a consequence as well. And again, that's not going to be very good unless people are interested specifically in controlling human beings, which I'm sure some companies and some governments are.
Yeah, yeah. So that, and this is, if I just share my screen. Can you see that slide?
Yeah.
So just to get you a little bit onto the page as well, Tom, and other people listening. So the way that, I mean, this is a very top level way of seeing it, but one way of seeing it is that what we need is collective intelligence. I mean, I think CI stands for collective intelligence. It can also stand for collaborative intelligence, but we really, really need to harness the human collective intelligence. Then we have, I'm saying HI and SHI, which is human intelligence and superhuman intelligence, because I'm specifically using the term superhuman intelligence because we're using the term artificial super intelligence, which isn't there yet. Yeah, so we're currently in the ANI world time, which is artificial narrow intelligence. Then there's AGI, which is artificial general, and then there comes artificial super intelligence. And people are very afraid of artificial super intelligence. They're also afraid of what artificial general intelligence might be. But we're currently actually only in artificial narrow intelligence. So I think this is where so many people are worried about what is ahead. We really don't know yet. So the focus is the energy, the urgency is telling us, right, let's focus on what we know, which is really perfecting our human intelligence so that we are able to control the artificial intelligence, and so it doesn't end up controlling us. So yeah, that's the way I see it, that we need to take this into consideration, that this is now a tipping point. And yeah, this is really looking at, if you just as an overview, we have the industrial revolutions, and we are here in the AI tech revolutions. But actually our human, this is really just in a summary sense, our human reality, our human intelligence sits way above the AI. We need, you know, energy systems drive AI, of course, because without energy, we have no AI. But we are the ones that actually sit above all of this. And then the universal laws sit above us, you know, because they guide everything. And the ecosystems sit underneath that. So if we just remember that actually the humans are in control here, not the tech, but we tend to forget that. Our core human intelligence capacities like decision-making and collective intelligence, critical thinking, all those things are being neglected, even though we are actually higher up the hierarchy. And that's another way of saying the same thing, that, you know, that human intelligence functions, human values and ethics, human ecosystems, natural ecosystems, universal laws, the human stuff is above the, if we say the fifth industrial revolution is where the AI sits, okay, we are as humans still the more intelligent, the ones that need to guide all of this. So this is, I've been working a lot on trying to remind people, you know, wherever I am, that human intelligence, cognition, social intelligence, core human intelligence processing, our belief systems, our moral compass, the foundation of the values and ethics. I mean, ethical especially is so important because it drives AI. So of course, people are aware of that. They talk about that, but when you get into the meat of the conversation, people talk about it, but we're not seeing it mirrored in organizations generally. Most leaders are not doing something to really focus on how do we focus on human ethics and the human intelligence and critical thinking? How do we harness collective intelligence? How do we harness collaborative intelligence? The human side above the tech. And this is where I think we need to now really be putting the focus. So that's why I thought, Tom, going back to your social intelligence, that kind of sits
Yeah.
up here,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You could even call it a natural ecosystem.
right. What you mean, the social intelligence could be the natural ecosystem?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got human
well,
ecosystem.
definitely a human ecosystem. Probably a human
A
ecosystem.
human ecosystem. So can you share with us a little bit about, Tom, about what is it that, you shared that article about the big brains. What is
Yeah.
it for you that makes that social side so important? How do you focus on that in your talks and in when you're bringing up?
Gosh, that's a very good question, and I think it's like, for me, I'm going to speak really, on professionally, if you like, just in my own words and language and thought.
That's fine. Your own word
Um,
language is, I'm
so
sure. Great.
growing up, I always thought, oh yeah, big business bollocks people, and you have thing that's who you should aspire to be, and this ridiculous notion that about business isn't about emotion and so on. And our brains are for number crunching, physics, developing theorems, and our whole education system is sort of in praise of I suppose Western type values, very important as they are, but it completely devalues humanity, perhaps. There's just over is that the balance is totally wrong. And actually, there was a LinkedIn comment that someone made today that was really interesting. A reply to that article, actually. And it was about how leaders, so often leaders are they leave the warm fuzzy stuff, the people stuff, to someone else. They sort of offload that and delegate it, when really leadership is, and it's very derogatory talking about warm fuzzy stuff, and it's very derogatory even talking about soft skills, because the more and more I learn and observe and live, that the more that we realize that actually that's what leadership is. It's all about social intelligence, and there've been so many statistics around 85% of your tech success, your professional success, is due to people skills, but we don't put that into practice.
No.
I haven't got all the answers, but I've got lots of questions.
Yeah, you have not got all the answers,
I
Tom.
am afraid not, Leslie. No. So, and it's really interesting because right through my sort of childhood, certainly university career, I thought, I had this inkling that, something's wrong, and why are we learning all this stuff? And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I didn't like to be too vocal about it because people would shout me down for being naive or or
Okay,
walk.
so this was
Yeah.
quite early on in your life. You felt this
Yeah,
you
definitely,
felt
definitely.
that there was
I think it's because such accolades are given to, intelligent people um, and so on, which I didn't consider myself to be. Um, and um, yeah, and this whole idea that I came across, probably 25 years ago, this whole idea of mindset, and that was my first sort of venture into um, you are definitely not your genes. Yeah, a genetic makeup is a very small element, important, but there are many
Hmm.
um, things arguably more important that shape who you are, how you can change who you can become. So I've always had that sort of sense without any academic backup to it.
And this is what really got you interested in studying neuroscience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, the whole idea, I thought neuroplasticity. Oh my God, that was, wow, that was just blew my mind when I
yeah.
first came across it.
So just to explain and to put this into context of people think about, okay, how can I make this practical? How can we focus on that social intelligence piece is what you're really focusing on, isn't it? In the sense of in that article, but in general,
Yeah.
well, we find, and lots of research is showing that social support again and again and again, we can see social support is a thing that will make the impact and the difference when it's to do with mental health, when it's to do with help in the workplace, any trauma impact. Um, we are social animals and we need social support. And the impact of social support is so foundational. And yet we don't give it a moment's thought very often in the workplace. And again, in the context of this HI AI disconnect and the HI tech disconnect, the social animal that we are is again very, very neglected, isn't it?
Mm.
So how do you bring that social relevance in? What kind of things do you do in workshops to help people
Mm.
to
Well,
focus on that?
I've
And
just written another article that should be out later this week, all
Mhm.
around KPIs
Yeah.
and how business, not only business, but our whole essence is about chasing our KPIs,
Yeah.
uh, and they're the source of considerable unhappiness because if we don't get them, we're miserable. But if we do get them, it's not joy, it's relief. Like if I set a KPI business growth by this much, um, it's not connected to uh, my core, what's really important. And a lot of business KPIs, and look, there's no easy answer. If you think about it, they're market share, revenue, and they're all connected with I've got to do better than before,
Hmm.
or I've got to do better than other people. I need more market share. Yeah, so they're sort of very much zero sum game KPIs and about growth. And I had a great, quote from someone who said, growth for the sake of growth is the philosophy of the cancer cell.
Hmm.
And if you think businesses, every year it's, oh, we've got to grow by X%, and it's like a bit of a silly game. But no one can opt out of it. You know, it's what the game is, if you like. So, and if you can't sing, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm not going to play this game," because then you'll cease to exist. So, as I say, I don't have the answers, but what I do in my workshops is pose the questions and it's a discussion and maybe there are little tweaks people can make a little individual. I really like the aggregation of marginal gain. I say to people, what what 1% thing could you do? And in that example, it could be, I'm going to choose a different KPI. I'm not going to, for instance, we worked with a pharmacist and they had a KPI pharmaceutical and doing eye drugs, really vision restoring eye drugs. And all the sales meetings, how many units have you sold? How many units have you sold? And I said, well, why don't you ask them how many people they've helped to see again in the
Yeah.
sales meeting? So, I mean, that's
Human,
quite,
human KPI, more,
yeah,
not
yeah,
just KPI. I mean, a very,
yeah.
even in itself, well, idea
But
of
that,
non-human. Yeah.
yeah, but if you like, you're doing that is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're still kind of measuring these KPIs, make sure I'm still growing, make sure I'm better than someone else, rather rather than something that's connected with human value. And
Mm, mm.
what do I really stand for, and how can I measure that I'm progressing,
Yeah,
etc.
in a human-centered way.
Yeah.
And I do the same in organizations, and regardless of the type of work, when you're doing any teamwork or cross-departmental work, the measurables are key, aren't they? The measurables are the way that people define progress, or there's lack of clarity of what the measurables are supposed to be. So either they have clear KPIs and there's far too many of them, or there's a complete lack of clarity of, I don't even know what good looks like.
Yeah.
Or there are the occasion, I have found also there are occasional times when actually people are involved in writing their own KPIs and there's a good team collaboration, but that's more the rare event where maybe the team manager makes the effort. I've seen where team managers make the effort to really get people on board to love their KPIs. That's a term that I bring in. I've not actually heard, that
Yeah.
should be the aim. You should love your KPIs. You should love your success criteria because you're the one
Yeah.
trying to deliver it. And if you don't love what you're trying to do, then your motivation, everything, your energy won't be aligned. But often when the team leader is doing that, it's not necessarily coming from the top of the whole organization. So it really needs to be a leadership narrative all the way through. And that's, in fact, I've hardly ever seen. I have worked with a board where they were very keen to promote that narrative. And it was a sort of short-lived ambition, if you know what I mean. And then it went back to measurables that people couldn't relate to or didn't want to relate to, and also disengaged from because they were unachievable.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, the KPIs become irrelevant because nobody's even trying to aspire towards them because they just think that they're so, it's like you're trying to plan your workout regime and you can do 5 press-ups and somebody says to you, by tomorrow you've got to do 50. Immediately you're going to disengage. It's like, no, not even going to try. So then again, you're back into your learned helplessness. What's your experience of that, Jazz? In terms of humans disengaging from their actual outcomes that organizations are trying to measure or trying to create a motivation to for the humans to follow?
Well, something you both can probably relate to, especially Tom, you with your business analysis hat on. When you're talking to stakeholders and you're doing requirements analysis, there's a lot of relationship cultivation going on in order to get data, in order to get information, in order to get perspectives. And so social intelligence is an important curator and cultivator of that kind of process. But one of the things that you end up discovering usually in those kind of conversations is where effort is being held back. Discretionary effort is a kind of HR term people use, engagement, employee engagement, those kind of things. And typically, if you look at why is discretionary effort being held back? It's because there is something missing in terms of that relationship. And it's an energy thing, I think, personally, for me. I can look at energy from a scientific perspective, where I've always built my coaching model based on my science background and just understanding one simple thing that everything in the universe actually answers to the law of conservation of energy. And you've done neuroscience, you probably understand all about the shortcuts that the brain does from an evolutionary perspective. But when there's a failure to conserve energy in business, either by the people who manage the operations or the leaders, the result is that people work in a way that's not sustainable. That's the long and short of it. And if it's not sustainable, two or three things happen. One, people can burn out from stress and other factors and strain. The other is productivity goes down, performance goes down, profit goes down, and shareholders are not very happy at the end of the day. And the market doesn't take much notice of that particular company anymore. So it becomes extinct. And it's amazing how a simple principle that's been around for billions of years, conservation of energy, speaks directly to what you were saying about growth. Because I've done molecular biology. I understand how cancer is an example of greed in the body. When cells start getting greedy for resources and just duplicating the way that they do. And I speak from experience because I was diagnosed with cancer 5 years ago. Then something is no longer going to survive somewhere down the line. And if you want flourishing amongst employees and in the business, in the sector, in the market, you have to show conservation of energy for three reasons. One, if you're not showing conservation of energy, there won't be sufficient energy to maintain things. And if you can't have sufficient energy to maintain things, you won't have sufficient energy to sustainably grow things. And if you don't have sufficient energy to sustainably grow things, you won't get evolution. So it all rests on conservation of energy. And
just say those three things again, Jazz.
So you need conservation of energy just to keep things going, maintain operations.
Yeah.
If you don't have conservation energy in terms of resources, people's effort and so on, and money, time, then the result is that you don't have sufficient resources to foster growth in a sustainable way. If you don't exercise conservation of energy when you're growing, then somewhere down the line, the energy and the resources and things, motivation, attention, whatever, they're going to run out. And when people stop paying attention, when people start being motivated, when people start forming intentions, then the result is the growth doesn't have sufficient momentum to go and explore new territories and actually evolve. So the innovation collapses, people stop being creative, and in the end, that company loses its brand kind of edge or innovative kind of reputation in the market. And it all comes down to law of conservation of energy, maintaining, growing, and evolving what people are actually doing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yes.
So how do you then harness that concept of how do you help people to make that into something that is usable? I use I think you and I talked about this, Jazz. I use the term alchemization to think about how do you turn the sort of data to knowledge hierarchy. So how do we turn the data, which is anything that is in itself actually quite useless on its own, because data on its own in a vacuum doesn't mean anything. So how do we make it meaningful? So the data turns to information, turns to knowledge, turns to intelligence. It doesn't necessarily happen in this order. It depends how we define these things. But I then think we need collective and collaborative intelligence, collective and collaborative learning. We need to make an effort to actually consciously go out and collect that collective intelligence to understand each other. That's what the collaborative intelligence is. And we discussed that, didn't we, Jazz, about how it's the internal collaborative intelligence as well, harnessing within ourselves. We've got to learn to collaborate with our thoughts and our feelings. That actually helps us then to collaborate with other humans as well. So that whole collaborative learning, collective intelligence. But then wisdom, we could define wisdom as being something that we can actually use. How can we create something meaningful out of the data, the information, the knowledge that actually then creates positive, sustainable change into the long term. And this is what I think it's quite useful to have, this alchemization idea between that, to say it's actually something different. It's a different substance. Because we can, like now we're talking about, so for example, social intelligence, or you've mentioned the energy conservation. How do we then take those concepts and turn them into wisdom? So really humans can do something useful with it to create a positive, sustainable change in their environment. And that's often the missing link, isn't it? That's where I think the human conversation is so important.
I'd probably look at it from three perspectives. Historically, I think in 2010 I did a chart like this where I had data, information, knowledge, intelligence, and then wisdom. And then later on I added other things. But then I realized this was very much how digital and computer systems build higher and higher levels of knowledge and agency and capability. But human beings, they tend to do things the other way around. They start from lived experience. They generate common sense, which is distilled into wisdom, intelligence, knowledge, information, and precise data. And what's needed is a reconciliation between the vertical hierarchy from data to wisdom and lived experience, and the human way of doing things, which starts from lived experience and ends up with precise data. Now, when you join those two things together, then you start to get some kind of coherence, which is useful. Now, in science, there are two principles to do with energy. One, many people are kind of familiar with, which is the idea of entropy, where things over time will, become more and more chaotic and disturbed because they're all seeking the maximum amount of freedom, those things. The other is a term which is related to entropy, which is called enthalpy. It's all terms from thermodynamics, but enthalpy is about total amount of energy there is in a system, in a closed system, and what all possibilities that you can do with it. So these are things to certainly consider from a scientific perspective. From perspectives other than science, especially from when I've been teaching martial arts and medicine from other cultures, there are principles to do with managing energy, which really boil down to three simple actions. You need to know what to do more of, you need to know what to do less of, and you need to know what to leave alone so that it can mature in its own way. And these are factors to support challenge and reflection. So in businesses, if you don't provide support at the right time, if you don't provide challenge or stretch at the right time, and if you don't provide reflection for processing at the right time, then you do get a decline in functioning, because these things are like vitamins. You need to get your 3 a day in the right doses and the right sources. And when you're missing support, or you're missing challenge or missing reflection, just like with vitamins, if you start missing out on those things, pathologies develop. People suffer from not having support for a long time, or challenge or reflection, or mixing those things up, where they're supported when they should have been challenged, or they're challenged when they should have been supported. So these three simple, more ancient ways of managing energy, I think, are things that are more pragmatic and need to be really learned from childhood, because they're the source of collaboration with yourself and collaboration with others. Because when you can't support, challenge, or reflect for yourself, or do that together with others, that's when collaborative intelligence and collective intelligence start to suffer, and people don't get to grow in sustainable ways.
What did you say, Jazz? You said know when not to change something. What were the other things?
A long time ago, somebody said to me, from a consultancy perspective, coaching perspective, how do you know what to work on with somebody? And I said, look, when a client turns up, they're looking for one of three things, but because they've messed up in some kind of way. They're looking to know what to do more of, what to do less of, and what to just leave alone and leave it as it is, leave it to its own devices, because it doesn't need fixing, it's not broken, or it's just the process of maturing and so on. People, when they typically do the opposite of those things, is when they typically come looking for help. They did more of something when they should have done less. They did less of something when they should have done more. They failed to reflect and rushed into action, or they over-reflected and didn't actually get down to doing something practical and acting on things. And that's usually when people turn up to people like us looking for help, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're very, very much focusing on the human element because you're focused on the coaching, you're focused on really where can the human direct him or herself.
It's the same problem. If you work with AI, you just want to know how can it help me identify what I need to do more of, what I need to do less of, and what I should be reflecting on or acting on. Usually, when AI screws up, is when it mixes those things up. It challenges you when you should have needed support. It colludes with you when it should have challenged you, and it gets you
You're
to
talking about a coach, are
fail to
you,
act.
or
No, I'm just talking in general. AI,
right?
when it
Oh,
when it's
AI,
up,
okay, AI, yeah,
it just gets those three basic things mixed up.
yeah, yeah,
Also, the research is showing us that a lot of AI implementation projects are failing, aren't they, in terms of whole organizational AI implementation projects. And one of the roots is one of the causes of this that again, this is the research when you're looking at why is it failing is because the leaders are not actually clear about what it is they're trying to achieve. So the leaders are not putting their human intelligence together saying, right, okay, collectively we've worked here for whatever 40 years or 50 years, maybe even 100 years, of like 6 people in a room. Right, what is it we know about this organization? How do we now apply this? What is it? What are our priorities? That's the human intelligence thinking really clearly. No computer, I mean, maybe the AI can help you to abstract that if you put some of your stuff in there and create your own feedback.
yeah.
And then the AI can maybe put it into nice structured thought. But first of all, you've got to put it in and say, what is my experience? As you say, Jazz, sorry, what is my
There's three axes that you typically need to get reconciliation on between human and artificial intelligence, especially for business leaders. The first is effectiveness and efficiency, getting an equity between the two. You can use AI to certainly help with efficiency, but you need the human interaction to secure the right kind of effectiveness and getting the right mix, the right balance or equity of effectiveness versus efficiency. It's not versus, it's plus efficiency. You can't have efficiency without effectiveness, and you can't really have effectiveness without some efficiency. Otherwise, things are just not sustainable, as I said. So that's one axis. The other axis I've noticed more recently is whether you are working with intelligence to connect in with what's embedded in people versus or plus what is embodied in people. If you use AI just to connect with what's embedded, but it fails to connect with what's embodied in people, especially culture and their nature and behaviors and values and so on, then things don't tend to stick. So you've got to again get the right mix of connecting into what's
Give an
embedded
example
and
of
what's embodied.
embedded versus embodied.
Mhm.
For example, when someone is learning about relating with people, they might have been taught some tricks to get people to talk to them about what their interests are, their preferences, and so on. These are what I would call relevance, superficial, ephemeral kind of factors. But if you want to connect into what's embodied within people, you need to look at their intentions. You need to look at their priorities. You need to look at their way of being. These deeper qualities that the person has lived experience of rather than just trying out, they're more embodied qualities. And this is the problem that I've noticed with AI. AI has a challenge in connecting to people at that embodied level. It's pretty good at working on the embedded relevance based stuff, but not the deeper resonance based stuff. So that's
So,
the other axis that it needs kind of mediating and getting the equity right between.
so you're to give an example, if you're trying to coach someone to be more relatable to other humans, embedded would be, oh, practice asking people open questions.
Yeah, smile at
Where-
them, kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
smile at them.
But
Where-
presence,
Whereas embodied
gravitas.
would be trying to understand what drives them and so
Well,
on.
being present to them, having a feel of what they're saying rather than trying to know
Yeah, yeah,
understand what they're saying. So
yeah, yeah,
just simply being with someone in an effective way where your presence is coming from a place of gravitas within you
yeah.
rather than a need to be of value necessarily, which is a problem a lot of coaches have. Connecting through presence at a deeper level, rather than just going by what's being said on the surface. That's an example of embedded versus embodied. You're working with
Yeah,
a deeper resonant form of energy rather than a temporary, ephemeral, shifting, personality-based exchange.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we all know, as Lao Tzu says, but however you would say it, knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom, mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. What you've just explained, Jazz, is a way. How do we understand ourselves? How do we?
Yeah. So intelligence would be an example of what's embedded, and wisdom is an example of something that you would say is embodied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
This is
mm.
another. This is a model that I use a lot, or that I've created, so that we need openness to learning as a general concept that embraces everything. So what you're saying, embodied and embedded, sits within self-awareness, other awareness.
Mhm.
Openness to learning also sits in how we enact that learning. It's a useful other concept to add to that. So yeah, embodied is the actual qualities of.
There's one last factor that directly speaks to what you were talking about earlier in terms of what leaders need to focus on. And over the last year, this is the third axis. If you actually map those axes vertically and horizontally, you get 4 quadrants to do with effectiveness, efficiency, and how they map to what's embedded and embodied. But I think there's another one which is beginning to catch on a lot more since I mentioned it first about a year or two ago, which is the need to not just focus on return on investment, but also ensure that there's a return on intention. It's a different ROI altogether. You're looking at, are you doing what you intended, as opposed to, are you getting done just what you need to in order to get a return on your investment? And typically, if you get an equity between those two things, it's not a good idea to just completely focus on intention and lose all investment altogether, or vice versa, have a lot of return on intention, but return on investment, but you get absolutely no return on what people intended, you know? So you need, again, a balance and equity between those two things. So it always turns out about these problems of equity between these things. And every business, every context, every scenario needs a unique mix, a unique equity of those factors in order for it to be sustainable and also empowering for people.
Yeah, but don't you find that very often people don't focus enough or even at all on what they are intending? What
Yeah,
is their
exactly. It's a big
intention?
problem.
And I talk a lot about elephants in the room. I often say that's part of my job, is to talk about the elephants in the room, because that is very often, it should be an intention to deal with those things that everybody knows are causing problems, but maybe because of a social reason or a political reason or a power reason, they're not talked about. So actually, to really talk about intentions is hard. And then the other thing I do a lot is talk about bridges. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
so in the beginning of an engagement, what kind of bridge are we trying to build? Are we trying to build a rope bridge, or are we trying to build a bridge that's going to last?
Mhm.
So they're two different designs. If we look at the current state and the desired state, we need to build a bridge between the two. And again, you're you so fundamentally
You can build a bridge really quickly and be efficient about it. You can just throw a rope across. But if you want something to last and to be effective and to be able to take loads and be able to handle weather, then you need to strike a balance somewhere based on the resources that you've got, the time that you've got, and the kind of conditions that people are probably going to experience in crossing that bridge. So that's that example where you need a certain amount of investment in the effectiveness of what you're building, and a certain amount of focus on the intention and making sure it serves its purpose to some degree, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore intention has to go behind. I mean, I talk it
Alongside, it's got to go alongside. Everything's yin and yang. Everything, all of these things. It's about proportion and ratio. Business analysts and leaders love their ratios, right? And these form 3 really important ratios that you've got to manage in a business when it comes to human and artificial intelligence.
yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of the time, and that we've talked, I think, around some really profound aspects around the importance of social intelligence and the hierarchy, and a lot of the things that we've talked about are all things that the humans have to guide. Humans with their insight into humanity have to guide. And so that's the ultimate bedrock of, I think, one of the key lessons and takeaways from our conversation, isn't it? But AI won't tell us to do these things. We've got to be in control of that. And we've got to be so much more than ever, I think, finally looking at the human needs.
Well, people don't often think of collective intelligence. They usually think about human beings, but actually, you know what? We can, as humans, collaborate with artificial intelligence, and together we can build a different kind of collective intelligence altogether beyond what either of us could generate.
Yes. So if we have that overlapping, virtuous overlap between AI and HI, and actually also get things into balance, is that? But
that's a sweet result we'd like.
Yeah,
so obviously, it takes a lot of scaffolding, I would say, to deliver that. And if it doesn't have sufficient scaffolding, it very quickly falls apart.
Yeah, which is why I think we need purposeful designed systems that actually do that with us and for us, in the sense of having a structure, which has been my work, which I'll share another time, but on collective intelligence 360.
That's we're familiar with, aren't we, Tom? When you're doing business analysis, we've got to do that kind of work. Otherwise, the conversations don't last very long, and we end up being pushed out to the edge.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying, Jazz? When
things from a business analysis point of view, from what you just said.
Yeah.
What is it that conversations that need to be had? What kind of data do you need to collect? What kind of auditing are you doing about the current situation and how it links into vision, mission, those kind of things, objectives and strategy? So there needs to be some building bridges, literally, between what's going on internally within a business and the tools and techniques that we actually employ in the act of helping things to get mapped and shifted.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think a framework and a process is so important, so that there is a regular flow of the collective intelligence from across the organization to the decision makers, and that there is actually the data flow also has that human element of turning it into useful actions rather than it just being.
Well, maybe flow then is like water, when water's in flow, it doesn't become stagnant. And same thing with intelligence. When it's in flow, it doesn't become stagnant.
It doesn't become stagnant, did you say?
Yeah.
So that it keeps on moving. Yeah.
It keeps fresh, it stays full of life,
Yeah, absolutely. So just conscious of the time, Tom, you said you were.
Yeah, I do need to. I'm overstaying my.
Yeah, and I'm conscious we've been online for an hour, and but I wanted to just wrap it up by thinking of. Can we just think of? Have you got any thoughts of what is it that could be useful in this community? For young people, for leaders, for cross-sector. I mean, the conversations we're having now are generic. They apply to all sectors. But is there anything in particular that you think would be particularly useful in a collective like this, when we're talking about the balance between HI and AI, the focus on human as opposed to human first? I mean, I'm very much about human first because we've been neglecting humans, and actually organizations and systems, very many of them are broken, and leadership development and resilience training often only helps leaders to burn out more slowly rather than dealing with the systems at the same time. So the systems need to be looked at to help the humans actually flourish, and so that the human needs are met. We're not even close to that. And on top of that, now we've got AI, and the tech is just dominant all the time. People are always focusing on how does tech solve our problems. So what can we share in a community like this to help people to grapple with some of these things? I mean, I think definitely research to help people have a place where there's some of the research, and to summarize that research as well and to discuss it. What else?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think making and what I do, what I like to think I do, is make research and ideas, particularly counterintuitive ideas, very accessible and easy to understand and act on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think people just don't know. You know, like I didn't know about so much stuff, and once you read and research, it really, you know, is a light bulb moment. And but how do you make most people don't read and research? They read kind of soundbite summaries, or, you know, popular newspaper headlines that say neuroscience proves that, you know,
Yeah.
eating rhubarb is XYZ, and when so there's so much nonsense. And I think by getting my purpose, if you like, is to affect insight at the most senior levels,
Mhm.
so that they have
Can I
a
just ask
positive
you,
impact.
that work that you're doing at senior levels, how often do you have to draw those leaders' attention to caveats about what they're doing, when you're working with those insights? Because when people don't connect into the caveats of a situation, and they look at it in a very binary kind of way, that's when the sophistication of what they're doing or the integrity of what they're doing isn't as strong as it could be. So I'm just curious how often you plug people into caveats.
So, how do you mean by caveat, Jazz?
Just looking at the nuances, not just accepting something at face value and saying, well, there's another side to this. And with young people, the big problem I notice with young people is the gen term means two things to me. And it's a problem. One, they're talking about generation, but the other thing I think they're doing with young people is they're generalizing young people. And they don't
Yeah,
realize that
sure.
people are, are not a label. They each have unique connections and conversations, and we should
Yeah,
be
sure.
tuning into that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're talking about Jen. When you say caveat, you mean, well, this is what they've always done, and how
Yeah,
do you
caveat is
come out of
like,
that
are you
cycle?
aware of the subtleties of this? Are you aware of the nuances rather than just thinking that everything is going to fit in this box or that box?
No, I mean, things never fit in any box, basically.
But
And
a lot of people think that way. That's the problem.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's, you know, wisdom is understanding things don't neatly fit in boxes.
That's the caveat science, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's
But
taking us back to quantum physics, isn't it? And this, the fact that we live in a quantum world, whereas humans like to see things in a linear way all the time, but that's actually forcing a linear approach to a world that is completely unpredictable and non-linear.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
we could get into a whole metaphorical
that'll be
discussion
for another
about
webinar, I
when
think.
Newtonian dynamics apply
That's
and
a real
when,
rabbit hole.
yeah.
oh yeah, versus
So
quantum.
yeah. Um,
But sorry, I interrupted you. You were about to say something, Tom.
no, so for me, success is like when someone just really thinks, oh my God, and has a, you know, in French we call it a déclic, when
Light bulb moment.
and they can never go back to the old way. So like understanding, oh my God, you know, you know, my job is about getting the most out of people and engaging people. You know, and it has a fundamental sort of shift, and probably that would be an embodied as well as embedded, to use that language. So for me, it's when success is when, you know, senior people have this fundamental new way of seeing things that will have a positive impact rippling down. And I know there's sort of not much AI in what I've said, but yeah,
I think you've actually done something very distinctive there, because if you can help young people not be asleep to what's going on in the world, and be awake to what's going on in the world, that in itself will be a huge preparation, I think, for their future.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'd like to think that business can lead politics. So,
And
because
humanity can lead business.
sorry.
And humanity can lead business.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I'd like to think humanity can lead business, and because I still, even though we're sort of very disparaging about business and business leadership, I'd say it's 10 times better than, at political levels.
that's where all the active agency is, I think, to make a change in a way that's
Yeah.
genuinely
So,
empowering, sustainable.
yeah. So for me, I don't like the way the world's going, and to make an impact, my way of doing that is through business leaders.
Mm.
But,
And then the other thing that I think is so vital that we need to proactively do is work with young people and school and education leaders. That the education leaders and the business leaders are so often disconnected. There's hardly any connection that education and business have in a sort of everyday normal sense, or the normal structures, I suppose, unless a school leader specifically goes out to meet local businesses or invites business leaders in. So young people are in a very dangerous and volatile place at the moment, I think, with social media and tech being so dominant, and especially with AI, especially the cognitive
yeah,
decline and cognitive
100%,
uploading.
100%.
That
Yeah.
specifically applies to young people. So this is again a bridge I think that we can help to create here, is helping education leaders to understand what's going on in business, and helping the education leaders to bridge that divide for them as
Yeah.
well.
Lizzie, look, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I said could only stay for half an hour, and I just
Quantum
can't.
has taken over. No,
Yeah, yeah.
sure, your blood sugar levels are dropping, but thank you so much, Tom.
Me too.
Oh,
And
It's a
thank you,
pleasure
and
going to.
yeah,
nice to meet you too, Jazz.
And you,
yeah,
Tom.
thank you both very much. I mean, we can wrap this up now. I'm going to put all the notes from this conversation. I'll put that onto the community, and
Appreciate it.
and yeah, Zoom will have transcribed it for us, and Zoom is actually usually very, very good at transcribing. So we'll see what comes out of it.
Lovely.
But there's some very interesting nuggets, and thank you so much both for your time.
I'll
Thank
connect
you.
into you via LinkedIn, Tom.
Yeah, please do.
Sorry,
Please
Elizabeth.
do. Yeah, yeah,
Take
yeah.
care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Everyone,
Bye-bye.
take care. Thank you both. Bye.
Bye.